And we can go right back to, I think, the beginning where I started speaking at all before it was international. And for me, I started speaking more than 10 years ago, and I realized that if you want to get started, it is genuinely, quite easy to find the opportunities because I just looked up which meetups were going on locally. And those are always, always looking for interesting topics, especially if there are meetups that happen regularly. They usually need content regularly. And if you have anything interesting to talk about, the in my experience, you usually just suggest it, and within a meeting or two, you're gonna be there because they don't have huge backlogs unless we're talking about one of the most popular ones in your area. So I start with stuff like, let me show you how I'm hacking on this Ruby compiler, or how we set up the CI system at this startup I was working with, and very, very concise, specific things that give you one specific um, piece of knowledge or value to the audience, and the title is catchy. And I started with those, and I did like a couple dozens of those over a couple of years, and that really helped me with a few things. First of all, it really helped me. Being on a stage is something that I think most techies don't find naturally. But if you start from the smaller meetups where it's only a few dozen people, it's a lot more intimate. You can go to the meetup regularly a bit before so you know some of the people, etc. I find it easier to ramp up. And as you start doing that, you also get some sort of a track record. So some of those might be recorded, you're going to have some nice pictures, and that can help you when you want to start moving from meetups to conferences. And then, conferences are a bit harder because conferences usually happen once a year or so, and therefore they have limited slots. But again, when they see people with interesting topics, and after you've talked a bit, you start finding out what are the things that you have that people can connect to. You can start applying for these. And first of all, you start usually nationally, and after you have a few of those, you can start applying internationally. And yeah, it takes time. I'm not saying you're gonna be speaking every month internationally within 2 3 months of doing it, but if you're in this for the long game because this is your career, I find that this is something that is amazing. And every time I go to an international conference and I get to have one of those speaker dinners and you're talking to people from all over the world, you see that this is a recurring pattern. People have started with their own small things, and all of a sudden they found something. Usually it's one or two big areas where they are excited about, they have interesting things to share, and they just start doing it again and again, usually not repeating the same talk, because I personally I think that's going to be boring for yourself, but in the same topic because it is interesting. So that's how I started, and that's how I usually recommend to people to start. I will add that if you want to make it a bit easier on yourself, um, I wouldn't start with all of the online Zoom conferences that we're seeing because it feels so different. There's such a huge difference between speaking live and just logging into another Zoom. And I would really recommend starting with some local meetups, even if it's just 15 people, as opposed to speaking in front of 50 or 100 or more on Zoom. I think it's better practice if you want to start building those muscles.
Hmm. This is actually a great tip to review some of the meetups that are happening in the local area in the city where the person lives, and then just go there to present a topic with some very specific outcome, as you suggested. That sounds like a very practical and actionable tip that pretty much anyone can take and implement right away. Awesome. And now, how do you propose your speech for some of these bigger events? Still, let's say national, some conferences that happen within the city, like Poland, for example, or Germany. Like, do you have some speakers bio, some document that you would also recommend others to create?
Interesting. So I'll tell you a bit what I'm doing oftentimes when I'm working with my clients who are tech executives and they need to or want to start doing the same. I go through a very simple process. First of all, sometimes we feel like we don't have anything interesting enough to share. People seem to think that everything I know, everyone else knows, or I'm not the expert on this. And this is a mind barrier that we have to put aside because it's just not real. If you look at, and this is the exercise I do. We open the conference website from the year previous, and we look at the agenda and we look at the talks, and you can see that a lot of them aren't groundbreaking. Oh wow, this is no one has ever talked about this topic before, or that the person speaking about this technology is not, one of the contributors to the open source framework, but just someone who has a good amount of experience in it. So first of all, you need to unlock that and allow yourself to talk about things you've seen, you've experienced, that are just good value sharing with others. Things that oftentimes you might have talked about with your peers if you know people from previous jobs over a beer or something. And you're like, oh, you wouldn't guess how much time we just spent setting up this, or what do you guys do about that? And if you start having those and you notice, oh, that's something that's repeating, you can choose those topics. I really like going over the previous years and seeing if there are any big um, sort of motives or certain types of talks that the conference seems to prefer, because then I try and tailor what we're going to be doing to match that, because no conference likes to feel as if you're just copying pasting the same thing all over Europe, right? You want to start with something that actually shows why it's the right thing for this specific conference. And when it comes to your bio, I wouldn't fret about it. Most people, especially, I would say that most conferences that I'm seeing nowadays that are even just national but serious enough, they have this even checkbox when you're submitting your talk to say, I'm a new speaker, or I might need some help preparing the material, etc. And a lot of good conferences are actually seeking those. They want to give them a platform, they want to give people the opportunity to start. So that's terrific. If you see those, just grab the opportunity, mark it as that, and then you can start with whatever bio that you would use to introduce yourself and any other, networking event, something very, very short about what you do and your background. And I would always focus more on the abstract of the talk, what people are going to be getting out of this, what's the right sort of audience for it, and why does it match with what the conference is about. And if you have those, think about the committee that's going to be choosing the speakers. They have hundreds sometimes of these proposals to go through. You want to make it easy for them to tell what you're going to be talking about, whether you're the right person to talk about this, and whether this is a good match for them. Because if it's not a good match, you don't want to be speaking in that conference. You don't want to be standing on that stage and seeing 100 people bored or taking out their phones. That's not. I don't think that's going to be a nice experience. So I want to make sure that I say what I'm going to be doing and why I think it's the right thing, and let them choose.
Wonderful, wonderful. I really like how you position the abstract and the topic more important than the speaker's bio, the document that is supposed to present the speaker, because a lot of the speakers who are just at the beginning of their speaking career, they are not known in the community. However, it could be really hard to come up with the topic itself, right? The mindset plays a certain role, as you suggested, and then once we unlock it, still there are gazillions of topics that one can talk about. And like, AI is now a trending topic. Remote work was 2, 3, 5 years ago. How would you go about defining what the CTO should focus on? Should he or she focus on something very specific, very niche topic, or rather choose a broader area, for example, AI innovation or LLMs or some of these broader topics, and come up with a topic that is rather broader?
I think that it really depends on the conference itself, and you can and should experiment with a few, even in meetups before and conferences, try and submit different types and seeing what type you personally also connect with the most. Some people really like the more technical ones where they can give a specific example, or here's what we did, a bunch of slides showing the exact setup or code snippets, whatever. If you're into that, that's fine. If once you move on and you want to try and give people some more interesting bits, I personally find here's, I took a nice tutorial and turned it into a talk, something that is very, very useful for introductory level. But if you want to go further, case studies are amazing. So if you can talk about, for example, what has worked for your company, or if you've been using something for 18 months, 2 years, and it has evolved with time because you grew, because your needs changed, showing that is very, very valuable because that's something that's very rare and you don't get that usually just from Googling.
Hmm.
So that, like, let's wrap experience and show you what we went through. That's amazing. If you've been through several jobs or several projects where you did something and every time it was different, sharing that case study of your experience is amazing. And there are a few times where I did something different and I said, I want to, I'm not even going to pretend I have all the experience. I just pitched a talk where I said, I'm going to be talking about lessons from 50 other startups, for example. And once it got accepted, I just, that's also a great experience to talk with a bunch of people who are your peers you haven't talked to in a while, and even people you don't know, and gather a lot of insights and put all of those together into an interesting sort of talk. So that's also a possibility. And you don't even need to feel like you're some content expert. You're just someone who can talk to people and try and get some interesting insights out of a bunch of people.
Hmm. This is actually very interesting. So you first come up with some area. For example, this is what 50 startups are likely to struggle with. You propose it as a topic, and only once it is accepted, you really go out there to talk to those people and uncover the substance of the speech. That's kind of very interesting approach. Has it
Yeah.
worked for you or someone else before?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
And I myself did it personally with a bunch of with a local event here a year ago when I wanted to talk about lessons from dozens, I don't remember the number I chose, of VP of engineering. And I wanted to say, here's what they usually go through in a year. And after that was accepted, I went and talked to a bunch of people to make sure that I'm tailoring it to the right to what the group is looking for. And also it was very timely because
Hmm.
if you asked 50 people 4 years ago, they would all talk about COVID. Now no one thinks about it, right? So I
Yeah.
do think that there's even value in doing this repeatedly every year or so.
Hmm. Wonderful. That's a great suggestion, and again, something very actionable that CTOs can take and play with. And the speaking itself has also a positive, hopefully positive impact on the personal brand that someone can build over time. So, how do you go about building your personal brand, either for yourself or the clients you work with? How do you think about it? What is the next step after someone starts speaking publicly?
Oh, that's it. Look, there's something here about I want to, from the get-go, say I know that there are things that are easy for me and aren't easy for others, and everyone needs to find the specific way that works for them. For example, for me, my personal brand was always something that was a bit easier to do when it came to writing. I've been blogging since, I don't know, um, too many years ago, and there's an article every week going out for years now. So I have hundreds and hundreds of articles. And for me, that's always been relatively easy. So if you find something that you can just do and it doesn't become a huge hassle because you have your job and you have your life and you have your hobbies, this shouldn't be something that's too hard for you to maintain. So pick something. It might be going to these meetups and speaking every 2 months and three, nothing too major. It can be posting if you're part of a company, you can set up an engineering blog and just decide that you're going to share something every month or two. That's already a good start. You can start a podcast related to your niche or your specific view of the industry or whatever. If you find a co-host or who's comes from a different background, or if you choose to have an interview sort of show, just like we're on, and talk about what you're seeing in your industry. That's I think always interesting if you have your specific like twist on things. There are countless of podcasts, but find what makes your own special, and especially if it works for you. And if you find that match, it's amazing. So for me, it's writing. I write easily, and that turned into the weekly articles and the newsletter and the two books I published, just because writing is just relatively easy for me. Um, I know different people who, for them, talking, speaking is easy. They don't even need to prepare most of their talks. So they just go again and again and again to events. And once you start doing this enough, I generally believe in, the flywheel concept. You have to keep doing this until you get some momentum. And for me, I'm doing this, and all of a sudden, you're getting asked to come to events in other countries, and people are flying you just to come and speak. And the first time you're like, whoa, I can believe this is happening. And eventually it becomes something you're sort of used to. So if you stick to things and it's not something that's too hard for you to do, you maintain it enough, it can just with time work for you. But do experiment with a few things. If you don't, you know, by default can think this is what is easy for me, be it speaking or writing or whatever. Try a few things and see what works for you. That's how I ended up speaking after I've been blogging for years, because I thought, oh, that blog post might turn into an interesting talk. And I just tried it and I realized, oh, yeah, I like both. But you should just be experimenting and seeing what works for you.
It's very interesting how you compare the kind of first speech where someone calls you to come internationally to present, and then at the 10th one you are already probably bored at flying again. But how to even think about becoming this international speaker? Like, is it too early for someone to think, hey, I want to travel to Finland to some conference or to Lisbon? How long does it take to get to this stage?
I would say that if you're looking to get your first one, like I'm not talking about making this into, your life's work where you're doing this every month or so, but something that you do from time to time. Usually, if you're really into this, you can submit things and get them accepted within a year or so, I would say, especially if you're not aiming again at the biggest, most popular events that have thousands of applicants. You
Mhm.
can get some international speaking, and that's amazing, especially if we're talking mainly to Europeans. It's so easy to go international. We're not talking about any cross-Atlantic flights,
Yeah.
and you can just go and have some amazing, amazing conferences. I remember one of the first abroad events I was to was in Stockholm lots of years ago. And I went there and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Such a different vibe and a different culture. And you get to see how different cultures and communities behave. And as a speaker, I always learn so much just by attending and seeing the other people and talking to them. So if you have a few of your those talks that you've done locally, I really believe that once you find something interesting, you can start applying to, again, probably not the top tier conferences, but conferences interesting enough that you would
Mhm.
like to attend as an attendee, but all of a sudden you're part of the speaker list. That's amazing. And you do it once or twice, and all of a sudden it just becomes routine like everything.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And now when you mentioned the topic, I just realized that someone may want to have just one topic and repeat it with slight additions, of course, or slight changes. Would you suggest to have one core topic that person, the CTO is adjusting and tweaking and improving and trying with different audiences? That's how, for example, the Toastmasters group does it. They are professional speakers and they polish their speech over 50 different performances? Or would you rather suggest the CTO comes up with a new topic every time with every new speech submission?
Mhm. So here we have, like everything else in life, we have a spectrum, right? You can be on either end. So on one end, there are those people who are professional speakers, and you can see that they're doing the same speech for like 5 years now because they laugh at the same points without even thinking about it. They go through everything, and you can see that everything is very rehearsed. That I think works if you really want to be a professional speaker. If you want to do those at tech conferences, once you repeat things a bit too much, I think it just comes across as a bit too rehearsed, and people usually don't expect that level of um, of finesse in tech conferences. We're all geeks at the end of the day. On the other end, we have those people who really every time come up with something new. And I know some of these, and some of them are amazing. It is something that you have to see whether you find easy in it. Some people constantly have ideas, right? They don't even need to work on it. They're like, oh, there's a new conference. What can I talk about? And boom, they have three ideas to submit them, and they might even forget them, and a month later realize they were accepted and then work on those.
Hmm.
And if that's you, knock yourself out. I personally, and most people I think, find it easier in the middle of the spectrum, where instead of changing completely every time and instead of sticking to the same thing, I stick to a bigger concept. So personally, I usually talk about tech leadership or about innovation for engineers. And that's something that I have talked, I don't know, I have like dozens of different talks in the past about these concepts, and each one is a bit different, but also they might have some overlap. And every time I do it, I find a little twist or add this, remove that, and it's something that's always evolving. So it's not boring for me, and it's always getting better because it's not every time the first time I'm doing it from scratch. But you should find again the thing that works for you. At least when we're talking about beginners, whatever works for you to get started, I think is the most important thing because we need to get you going.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the speech itself, once it is posted on LinkedIn or somewhere, can also help the CTO to stand out in the crowd. Maybe there are some other ways how to stand out. Maybe someone is not comfortable as a speaker just yet. So when you work with your clients, how do you go about figuring out what makes a CTO stand out and how to rebrand someone on the job market?
So I sometimes I talk to people and I ask them what they would say is success for them. Like right now, we're at let's say the middle of the year. 6 months from now, what would you say is a would have been a successful year? Well, how would you say I did good or not? And 95% of the time, the answer is we delivered what was on the roadmap. Like I ticked off the objectives. And I'm okay with that. But that's like the bare minimum. The bare minimum. I go to a restaurant. You ask the chef, what would you say is a good thing? And I'm like, people get the food they asked for. Wow, right? That's not groundbreaking. So I'm always saying, what's the edge that you're aiming for? I'm hoping that you have the basics right. I'm hoping that when I ask for a burger, I'm getting a burger and not a pizza. But after we get past it, what are you aiming for? If it's a restaurant, it might be about the experience. It might be about amazing ingredients. It might be about, I don't know, a great wine pairing to go with the food. When we're talking about a CTO, it can be also a whole bunch of different things that set you apart. And when I'm working with people, if I have to look at it from afar and zoom out, I would say that the top types of CTOs who really stand out are those who aim to not just deliver the basics, but also have their own goals for themselves personally or for their organizations to see that they're moving things forward. So it might be the executive who really wants to help the company, for example, real examples. Okay, I'm not gonna come up with things that no one ever did. Real example, one CTO we worked with really wanted to help the company pivot because he realized that their SaaS offering didn't make sense and the company needed to pivot. And that required some technological leaps to make it possible to offer something different. And he made that his goal. It wasn't part of the roadmap when he started. He had that idea. He decided he needs to go for it. He pushed it through with the product, the head of product and the CEO, and eventually that turned into his own baby in the company and went amazing. Another example would be the CTO who realized that because of a whole lot of reasons, they could no longer keep hiring people in the same city and they need to start expanding. And he decided that he is going to crack the code of how to make hybrid work and non-co-located work for his company. It's not just we're going to deliver, but also I want to, a year from now, when we ask everyone or you have a survey, you see it's amazing. It's not something that people do, but okay, it works, but something that people think I couldn't even imagine working in such an environment. And he made that his priority. And as you can see, these are very, very different. But you can choose what you want to do. And if you have that, usually what it means is that you are not just aiming at the basics, and that already really sets you apart. Having worked with so many executives, so many people, not because they're incompetent, not because they're lazy, but because they find it even hard. Again, this is a mental barrier. They find it hard to even imagine what extra might be, or what how much agency they actually have and can push for different things, that they just want to they're just aiming to deliver. And the problem with that is that usually we get around what we aim to do. So if you're just aiming to deliver, you're not likely to overwhelm anyone. You're gonna be doing well, hopefully, and just delivering, and that's fine. But if you want to be doing something that's amazing, and if you want to personally grow a lot faster, you have to aim a bit higher. So find something. That's usually what I'm trying to help my clients find. Like, what's your passion in this role? What would you say I call these career highlights. You're going to look back at this 10, 15 years into the future. You're going to look back and you're going to say, this moment was amazing because of what? Like, don't waste your life. Don't just have year after year of delivering the roadmap, because it might be nice, but life's too short to just do things routinely. How are you going to be growing? What you're going to be doing that you're going to be proud of? And the amazing things about this is the win-win-win. If you do that, you grow, your organization has a lot of fun, the company succeeds, so everyone gets a huge boost out of this sort of thinking.
I really like this because it reminds me how important excellence is in our daily lives, and it can do great things as a result for the CTO. But how to go from having the excellent outcomes at work to other people out there knowing about all those excellent outcomes? If I use your example with the restaurant, right? You can deliver an amazing burger, but unless the customer tells the friends or they post the review, no one would know about this experience. So for the CTO or a tech lead, what does it mean?
Yeah. Great question. You're so right. So if you look at right now, people listening, if you open LinkedIn on your phone and just start scrolling, I'm guessing you're gonna start seeing a bunch of the same stuff. People celebrating, oh, we had a sales kickoff, we wrapped up the year, here are nice pictures from our hackathon, right? A bunch of those sorts of stuff. And my problem with that is that people are trying to indicate success through things that don't necessarily mean success, and also are quite boring and repetitive. I keep seeing the same hackathon pictures, people with nice swag shirts and pizzas. Okay, wow. Instead, I always say, instead of going for those vanity metrics, start doing those interesting things we just talked about. Like, did you deliver anything interesting? Did you have an interesting experiment in how your organization is structured when it comes to, for example, if you have two centers in two different European cities and you decide that every team has to be a mix or not? Or what, find interest, you did something interesting, share that, start talking about that, what I learned, or you'd never imagine what I learned doing this, or this really failed. I love those. If you're vulnerable enough and you can be frank enough with the world and say, we tried that and it was a huge nightmare, I think that's amazing. And if you do those, and again, if it's easy for you to write, it's amazing, because or some people do this on videos on LinkedIn or whatever. If you start sharing those little learnings on Twitter, X, on LinkedIn, you get a few things. First of all, you get this personal brand starting to build, because people see this and realize, oh, she seems like an interesting CTO. She does things and she tried that. And I remember this was hard and she solved it, whatever. Do that. And second, you're also getting these mini experiments when you're seeing what are the things that people really connect to, and then you can get ideas to, oh, maybe I can turn that into a talk, or maybe that needs to be a blog post, or maybe we need to hold a meetup about this in my company because people seem to really like this thing we did. And so just by starting to share your learnings and your failures from time to time, you're not just getting the experience you personally got from doing it and learning it, you're repurposing that same experience to turn it into your personal brand. And again, the flywheel here. You do this more, you realize, oh, this is a talk, this is a meetup, and you just get things easier and easier with time. And if you're not thinking just about yourself, but also about your entire organization, all of a sudden you're building your organization's engineering brand and you're making it easier to hire top talent or to host more interesting meetups and have interesting partnerships. So it all just, again, win win win.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And now, when you enumerate all of these activities, it reminds me how difficult, how complex, how time-consuming this activity could be, right? And some people may be a bit scared of all of this, right? Because they may be great CTOs, they manage their teams, they take care of their family, and probably the last thing they want to do is to write posts on LinkedIn, then blog posts, then go to submit their speakers' proposals to conferences, and then prepare the so, but if we look at it from another angle, I mean, it definitely works, right? It helps people to become high profile thought leaders. Um, can you, is there any way to compare how much time should be allocated to all of these other activities? So, not to manage the team, but if we look at some of these really high profile CTOs in large companies, they're often on conferences, right? They often produce blog posts and other articles. But how much time do they spend relatively as a percentage of their day or week? Is there any statistic like this that you have heard?
I wouldn't necessarily like compare myself to the CTO of Stripe or something like that because I think that's too different. But first of all, there are different types of CTOs. And when you see the title, you might think one thing, but it actually means something else. And in every company, you have to realize whether you're the CTO who's like the tech expert internally doing the architecture and the deep tech, or if you're the CTO who's the outward facing part of the company who's techie, like in Stripe, the CTO has to be very technical, but also very outward facing and going to these conferences and talking to partners. And sometimes the CTO is also maybe a VP of engineering, the people, the person in charge of the people and the processes. You might be doing one of these, you might be doing all three. It depends on what you do. But unless you're just the outward facing one, this doesn't need to be something that you're devoting, 20% of your time to. It shouldn't take a day, a week, because that's not possible if you have other responsibilities like managing your organization. When we start this with companies, I usually tell people, I'm going to tell you a secret, as a consultant who sometimes charges people a nice amount of money to do things, they always realize that my magic is making people do things in tiny, tiny bites. That's it. I'm not a magician. So I just tell you, let's say that we started, I would tell you, okay, what experiment are you committing to for the next month? Maybe it's submitting one or writing one abstract a week and then submitting those over the next month or something like that. Or posting on LinkedIn once a week. That's it. And whatever you tell me, I'm going to tell you, okay, so can you do that if I lock you in a room for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, take your phone, and you're just allowed to do just that. No Twitter, no nothing for 30 minutes. Is that enough time to come up with an abstract? It's not perfect. You can show it to me later, etc. Usually people say yeah, and that's it. I just ask you to commit to 30 minutes a week, and I'm waiting. It's a shared event on the calendar, even though I'm not in the meeting. And I'm waiting to get the email after it's sent telling me, here's what I got. And that's it. This little 30-minute block is usually enough to get something substantial and do it once a week. Amazing. You see that you need more time. Okay, maybe 40 minutes, whatever, fine. Again, there's no one size fits all. This is a good way to start, but start doing that. And if you stick to it, and either some people just have an iron discipline and they can just do it every week and that's it. I just told them and that's it. They don't need me. Other people need me to email them, you know, after the meeting because I didn't get an email. They're like, oh yeah, I need, they need someone on them. Fine. But find what works for you and commit to that. And 30 minutes. That's it. That's literally how I've written several books, how I've written hundreds of articles, just because I put 30 minutes on the calendar and I stick to it. I take the phone aside, I, I make sure that my computer is in do not disturb, and I work. If I really am having a hard time, I might go with the laptop, to a park and not have any internet access for 30 minutes. That really makes it easier to write. But just 30 minutes, you're gonna go insane if you don't do anything for 30 minutes and just stare at a blank screen. You're gonna write something. So do that.
Yeah, this is a great tip, really actionable and something that everyone can do, even if they struggle with discipline. And I sometimes also I just have to disconnect and go to a coffee shop where I have different environment with different settings, and I can do some deep work. Awesome, awesome, cool. Yeah, I mean, if there are people who are transitioning their careers and they would like to get more and better opportunities, what are some of the quick wins that you would suggest that they do?
Well, when I sometimes I help companies interview CTOs, and I keep seeing people who are just not thinking big enough about the role. If you talk to CEOs enough, you're gonna see that most of them, what they really want, at least the good CEOs, when they're looking for people under them, they want people who come up with their own approaches, their own attitudes, who are taking the initiative. The right, every CEO told me, I want them to tell me what needs to be done. I don't want to tell them what to do. So start working on flipping your mindset, first of all, in your current job, and also when you're applying to others, about how you're going to be proactive. Ask the right questions. Make sure that you're in the right meeting so you have enough context. I talked to a CTO in Italy like a year ago who told me that the founders of the startup he was working in decided to acquire a different, smaller startup for the technology and never talked to him. And only after it was finalized, we realized, and then, oh, guess what? The technologies don't even match. So that's not a very good acquisition, right? Um, so, and that happened because all parties here have some responsibility. And I told them, if you would have been enough in conversations with them about what the business needs and listening to them and talking to them, not just as the techie, but understanding the business enough to be able to have those conversations, maybe they would have asked you, or maybe they would have, even approached you to come up with your own suggestions of how to solve this. So you need to place yourself as a real leader, executive, whatever your title is, and ensure that you're getting as much impact as you can in your current role. And when you're interviewing, I always ask people, what would you do? How would you know what we need to change here? Or how would you approach your first quarter? And just like I'm looking for when I'm working with you, I'm looking to see what's their extra, what they're aiming at. I want to see that you're always trying to come up with what you're improving. If someone tells me I recently just almost bit someone's head off, I asked him, oh, you're new in the role, what you're gonna be doing? And his answer was, I'm going, first 100 days, I'm gonna sit and learn and watch and see what's happening. I'm like, dude, you're in a startup. 100 days, it's like forever. You need to
Mm.
start doing something. I'm not saying rip out everything within a week. That's not, that's the other extreme. But you need to be active. You can't just listen. It's like having a CTO who just reads all the books in the world but never acts. It's not going to help anyone. So take action, decide what you're going to change, and that's already going to make you so different. Like we talked 20 minutes earlier about applying to committees for applying to committees about your possible talks and thinking about what the committee is looking for. If you're going to be looking for a new role or a promotion, think about what the CEO wants. And the CEO wants someone who is proactive, who can communicate not just in techie terms, but understand the business and really want to understand the product and what we're doing and why it matters. And if you're coming from that stance and that mindset, you're going to be so much different from the other 99 people that they saw. So that's what you should be aiming for.
Well, this is a great advice, really, and something that a lot of the CTOs who are focused on the technology can get better at to improve their business understanding, the business acumen, and financial management and whatnot, so that they can engage with other shareholders. Awesome. So just to be mindful